Hawaii is working on its biggest public infrastructure project ever, a fully automated elevated rail system on the island of Oahu. This is a project that's been discussed for more than 50 years. But why does it take so long to construct a railway that's barely 30 kilometers or 18.5 miles long? Hey, I'm your host Regis, and today we're exploring the ambitious, if not pioneering, Hawaii Skyline, and why it's been held back for decades by political and financial challenges. The Skyline has been hailed as a futuristic, sustainable model of transport that would serve up to 120,000 residents per day. When completed, it'll run for about 30 kilometers from East Kapolei on the south shores of Oahu through downtown Honolulu and onto Ala Moana Center near Waikiki Beach. Right now, the project's about 65% complete, but believe me, it's been a long road to even get this far. Officials first called for a rail system way back in the 1960s as congestion worsened in downtown Honolulu. In the 1970s, Frank Fosse backed an ambitious plan for a rapid transport system in the city and the suburbs. This was set to cost between $700 and $900 million, which the mayor's team touted as a good deal that the city can hardly afford not to build. But President Reagan's administration didn't agree. When the federal government cut funding for public transit, Fosse's successor, Mayor Eileen Anderson, canceled plans for the railway. During her administration, officials took a different approach to the traffic problem. They rebranded the residential community of Kapolei as Oahu's second city. They hoped to draw traffic away from Honolulu by creating new businesses and government offices in Kapolei. But these efforts weren't very successful. Kapolei remained residential. People continued commuting to Honolulu, and congestion just got steadily worse and worse. When he came back into power, Mayor Fosse restarted the plans for the railway in 1986. But he was forced to abandon it yet again 6 years later, when the city council voted against a tax increase to fund the train. One city planner called this a huge disappointment, like the air came out of us. As tourists flocked to Oahu and the population surged, traffic got much worse through the 1990s and early 2000s. Oahu's major highway, the H1, was originally built for a smaller island population and has become a traffic nightmare. In recent years, Honolulu has consistently ranked among the most congested cities in the United States. And besides that, the island also has another goal. They want to become carbon neutral by 2045. That's why in the early 2000s, the whole situation was reassessed. Officials proposed several other ways to offset the terrible traffic and rejected them all. Ferries would be too slow, a tunnel wouldn't benefit enough drivers, and adding more buses alone just wouldn't do enough to decrease traffic. They also considered some pretty out there proposals. Magnetic levitation, anyone? Unfortunately, that's proprietary technology. Okay, so rail was leading the competition, but what type would be the best to build? The debate mainly focused on whether a rail system should be at grade, on street level, or elevated. While the at grade proposal was cheaper, it was rejected for a few reasons. Having trains at the same level as cars wouldn't actually do much to improve congestion or shorten commute times. Add in the risk of collisions and pedestrian accidents, and the fact that downtown Honolulu has some very short streets, and it became clear that an elevated rail system was the way to go. Finally, a decision was made in 2006. The Honolulu Department of Transportation Services recommended an elevated rail system as the best option. Separating the rail system from the rest of the traffic would also make it possible for trains to be driverless, an exciting prospect for Hart and their partners, Hitachi Rail. And this is what it looks like. The Skyline is the first electronic driverless urban rail system ever to run in the United States. It's controlled by a central system, using a range of AI-enabled cameras, sensors, and predictive algorithms to make decisions in real time. It's classified as having the highest level of automation, meaning that no human presence whatsoever is required on the train or platform. Instead, the train is monitored by humans from a distance at all times. The Central Operations and Control Center, located in Oahu, has access to over 1,500 cameras along the line, and passengers can contact the monitors on duty using phones on board. So, what's the price tag on this high-tech solution? That'll be about $11 billion. Over $5 billion more than was originally planned for. That's more than $366 million for 1 kilometer of rail line. Construction began back in 2011, and all 4 segments of the Skyline were set to be completed by 2020, but the timeline has also gotten pretty derailed. See what we did there? As of June 2023, 9 out of the 10 stations in the first segment are up and running. The second and third segments are set to open in late 2025, with the fourth expected by 2031. Back in 2006, the approval of plans to build an elevated railway did nothing to end the political and public squabbling over Oahu's transport plans. Some welcomed the prospect of new and improved public transportation, while others railed against the prospect of tax increases. These debates ignited the 2008 mayoral election, which one commenter described as a referendum on rail transit. The incumbent mayor, Mufi Hahnemann, fiercely supported it, while rival candidate Panos Preveduros pushed to abandon it. A third candidate, Ann Kobayashi, argued that voters should decide, and called out the city for only releasing information on the proposed railway mere days before the election. Although she lost the election to Hahnemann, a proposed steel wheel on steel rail system was put to a vote later that year, and 53% voted in favor. So it was a pretty close call. Now, managing a project of this scale is no small feat, and the same can be said about running a business. That's where today's sponsor, Odoo, comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that combines a full suite of integrated apps, making it easier to oversee every part of your business, from sales and CRM to inventory management and accounting. For example, Odoo's CRM app lets you set up a streamlined sales pipeline and automate your sales tasks effortlessly. Their timesheets app helps you stay on top of employee schedules, and the accounting app makes it a breeze to auto-generate and send invoices. With Odoo's MRP, you can plan production needs down to the last detail. Paired with real-time inventory tracking, you'll keep your business running like clockwork. What's even better is that Odoo is fully customizable, so you only need to use the apps that fit your specific business needs. This makes it very easy to use, even though there are so many different features. To check it out, head to the link in our description and start managing your business more efficiently with Odoo. There's no risk for you, as you can get a free 14-day trial with no credit card required. So give it a try, and thanks again for Odoo for sponsoring this video. And now, back to Hawaii. As I said earlier, the public voted in favor of high-speed rail in a very close vote. And now, the city just had to build the thing. But you guessed it, a lot of challenges came with that as well. Let's start with a crucial cultural phenomenon that affected early construction: ancient burial sites. Native Hawaiians historically kept human remains scattered and hidden to prevent enemies of the deceased stealing their bones. This means that sacred remains can be found almost anywhere on the island, including along the proposed site of the new railway. In 2012, the Supreme Court halted construction until proper archaeological surveys could be completed. Engineers also had to contend with major environmental challenges. Oahu's dramatic cliffs, coastal roads, and volcanic mountains give the island a wildly diverse topography. That also drove the decision to build the Skyline on an elevated guideway, like we mentioned before. This would avoid disruption to the landscape and local communities, and would allow the train to run faster once it was built. Elevating the system also allowed for an ostensibly cheaper, narrower train line, about 9 meters wide to accommodate 2 sets of tracks. The height was a bit more troublesome. It typically stays between 9 and 12 meters, but in places, it hits some obstacles. At 2 points where the train soars over the freeway, the rail line rises up to 24 meters, and at one station standing right in the airport's flight path, less than 5 meters. To achieve all this, the rail line is being constructed incrementally from over 2,700 concrete bridge segments. Each weighs about 50 tons, so it has to be lifted by crane onto a cart before being bonded together. They're secured by drilling foundational shafts up to 108 meters into the ground, the deepest cast-in-place shaft on the planet. Casting these is complicated by soil conditions, and engineers have had to drain or inject grout into the ground in spots that flood during high tides. As well as floods, Oahu is vulnerable to natural disasters like earthquakes and hurricanes. The Skyline structure is reinforced with steel, helping it to withstand disaster and absorb seismic shocks. And yet, the project has still been plagued by structural issues. Since 2018, mysterious cracks have been appearing in the concrete, and they're growing. These appear to be limited to the areas that weren't reinforced with steel cables, but It's unclear why they didn't receive this treatment in the first place. Premature cracks have also emerged along the tracks, with engineers raising concerns about their unusual design. You know that clickety-clack noise on a train? That's the sound of the train hitting a small gap between the tracks. The Skyline is a quiet, smooth ride because it uses an unusual flangy-bearing frog design with no gaps. But in 2020, it was discovered that the train's unusually slim wheels didn't quite fit the tracks, risking accidents and even derailments at crossings. Those gaps have been temporarily filled, but eventually, the wheels will need to be replaced altogether. The tracks also caused problems in areas where they were found to run too close to electrical lines, water and sewage utilities, and the authorities spent hundreds of millions of dollars relocating these amenities. All this for a system that was promised to be the least disruptive option to the landscape. Yikes. These hiccups came with significant costs and delays, causing Hart to scale back the project in 2020. That year, they put together a new plan that reduced the first segment of the project from 32 kilometers and 21 stations to 30 kilometers and 19 stations. While the Skyline boasts many firsts for public transport in the United States, like sleek open train cars and platform screen doors, there are fears that its astronomical costs and bureaucratic nightmares will put off other cities from investing in public transit. And all of this has fueled the question, is it worth it? Accusations of corruption and incompetence have plagued Hart, who've been the subject of several state and city audits over the years. These concerns have caused the federal government to withhold $744 million since 2015. But still, supporters argue that the long-term benefits outweigh the costs. When fully operational, the Skyline is projected to remove 40,000 car trips from the road per day, the equivalent of 8 new freeway lanes. Each train has the capacity to hold 800 passengers, or about 10 city buses. But passenger numbers are currently nowhere near as high as predicted, about 3,000 versus 19,000 predicted per day. In some parts, that's due to inflated estimates, but another reason is that the segment that's completed runs through the least populated and developed areas of the route. Meanwhile, busy parts of downtown Honolulu and Waikiki Beach remain underserved. It remains to be seen how passenger numbers develop once this is fully completed, so there's still a lot to be done. The next phase of the project will see 8 kilometers of track running to the Middle Street Kalihi Transit Center, then another 5 kilometers to the Civic Center station in Kakako. The Skyline will then be completed with 1.5 kilometers of track and 2 final stations that will take it all the way to Ala Moana Transit Center. As of September 2024, Hart is seeking extra funding for these stages and has yet to defer some features, like a system stabilizing the voltage of the train's electrical supply until it's acquired. In response, opponents have pushed for the project to pause and reassess once the next phase has been completed, expanding the bus service or building a lighter rail system. But for now, it's going ahead. One critic summed up Hart's approach as, well, we can't stop now. But what do you think? Is building the Skyline actually worth the effort? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.